All right, so this last one we're going to look at the hyperbolas, and not much need to talk about this part. Again, it's minus h and minus k shifts it vertically, horizontally, and vertically. We're going to do more of completing the square. So when your hyperbola is in this form here, you have to complete the square. And so let's walk through this. Um, and once you get this part, then it's not, not too much left other than kind of observation. So first thing I'll suggest you do is factor out. So we have our x terms and then we have our y terms. Factor out the common factor from the x terms, and we have x squared minus 8x. Now you don't want to factor out the x. Leave the x in there because we're trying to set up a trinomial here. And then do the same thing with the y. So y squared. Now be careful, you got the plus because we need that one to be a minus. If we distribute it back, or we pull out the negative 16, so it's a plus 2y there. And then plus another spot, and we get our 16, and now we got to add these two, whatever these numbers are, we got to add them over here as well. And actually that last one would be a minus. So what do we need to put here to make this be a perfect square? So we divide that number by 2, so it's negative 8. Divided by 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. And then that will put a, well, let's talk about that in a second. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. All right, so now over here, we're not putting 16 in 1 because we factored out a 9 and a negative 16. So 9 times 16, we're actually adding a 144. And then negative 16 times 1, we're actually subtracting a 16. So now, so you got to pay attention to that. When you factor this part out, you got to multiply it back in when you add in the correct number over here. So now let's factor that. We get x minus 4 squared, and then minus 16. We can factor that and get a y plus 1 squared equals 144. And now we need to get it in that form with the 1 on the right side. So we're going to divide everything by 144. So we get x minus 4, 9 over 144 is 1/16. And then this will be y plus 1 squared over 9. And that equals 1. So now with hyperbolas, this one with the x squared is the positive term will open horizontally. And so let's see, the center will be at 4, negative 1. The vertices, so now these are opening horizontally. So the y part is not going to change. So we have 2 vertices, negative 1 is going to be the y coordinate on both. Now how do we figure out what do we do with 4? So so this tells us that a equals 4. So that would be a squared is 16. So a is 4. So we're going to add and subtract a, or add and subtract 4. So that'll give us 0, and that gives us 8. So there are our vertices. And then focus points. So we need to figure out what c is. So c squared is a squared plus b squared. So that's 16 plus 9, which should give us 25. And so that tells us that c is 5. And so that means that we need to add and subtract 5 from the x part. Because again, we open up horizontally, so the x is the only thing that's changing. We're just we have our vertices, and then we have our center there, and then the vertices, and then the focus points. So we're not moving vertically here, we're just moving horizontally. So 4 minus 5 is negative 1, and then 4 plus 5 would be 9. So there are our focus points. And then the last thing we need is the asymptotes. Now the asymptotes, if you try to put this in slope-intercept form, it's a little bit more work, and I don't think it's worth it because WebAssign will take the answer. It'll take the correct answer however you put it. So no need to worry too much about that. So the easiest way to get it is how you should type it in. So now recall that if it's centered at the origin, all we would do is put the y denominator, the square root of the y denominator, over the square root of the x denominator, and that would be our slope. So in this case, it'd be 3/4 x, but we are shifted. So all you do in this case now is you say y plus 1. I don't need any of those parentheses. Let's just write this. Not ordered pair. We just have two equations. Y plus 1 equals 3/4. So that's the square root here over the square root here times x minus 4. So you can see it's just that part equals the slope times that part. And that will give us the asymptote. And then all you do to get the other one is just make the slope negative, and everything else is the same. So there are the asymptotes. And let's see, we can also graph this. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Our center is at 4, -1, so that'd be right there. Our vertices at 0, -1, and 5, 6, 7, 8, -1. And then we can also go up or down 3 for this part, so we can create our box. So 1, 2, 3, and then go down 1, 2, 3, and then that gives us our box that we can create. So we can draw the asymptotes, which again, don't need to really know how to do this for WebAssign, but not a bad idea to know. And then you draw your diagonals. There are your asymptotes, somewhat. If I can draw straight, which I can't. And then now the part you got to, if you are drawing this by hand, make sure you don't go to the actual vertex and not the axis. So we used to go to the X or Y axis depending on which direction we were going. But we just need to go to the vertex, and there we go. Okay, but the important part is make sure you can complete the square. You want to be able to do that, and then once you get the standard form there, then you can get all of the parts that you need. All right, so just to kind of recap, there obviously the center comes from this. Here we are subtracting a to get there. We are adding a to get from here to here. You are subtracting c, and from here to here, you're adding c. All right, so I think we have one more. And so we're going to find an equation where the vertices are -1, -3, and 3, -3, and then the focus points are -3, -3, and 5, -3. So this would tell us that this is our A and our A, and then C and C. Obviously, those are not equal to A and A, but we can figure out what A is based on those. So the midpoint of this would give us our center. So obviously, we're opening horizontally. The midpoint between -1 and 3 would just be 1. So we have x minus 1 squared over a squared. We'll figure out what that is. And then y plus 3, so minus -3 squared over b squared. And that equals 1. All right, so we know that. 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 So we know that So the distance between these two vertices is 4. So that would mean that A is half of that, which is 2. So A equals 2. We can do the same thing with C. The midpoint between -5 and 3 would be 1. And or we could say that the distance between -5 and 3 is 8. So halfway would be 4. That's really what we're interested in. And so C squared is A squared plus B squared. So C squared is 16 equals 4 plus B squared. So B squared equals 12. And of course, A squared is 4. And so that's all we need. So x minus 1 squared over 4 minus y plus 3 squared over 12. There you go. All right, so again, with all three of these different types, if you're comfortable with what we did in the previous sections, then these should not be too difficult. The more comfortable you are coming into this, the easier this one will be. The other thing we've talked about is make sure you can recognize so x squared. So if one of these is squared, of course, this is a parabola because first, or there are a couple of problems in here where they ask you to identify, they give you the equation, you have to identify what type it is. So if one of these is squared, then it's parabola. If you're adding, it is an ellipse. And if you're subtracting, it is hyperbola. So probably already know that, but always good to keep that in mind when you're looking at these. All right, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to email me and we'll answer those as quickly as possible.